It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 31, looking at the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Cameroon. Part 2, the selection. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is a continuation of Series 31 on the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is part 2 in our coverage of Cameroon's players. The final roster is released, and we're looking at the selections of Cameroon. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation from after the 2023 African Cup, that taking place in January 2024, up until the October 2025 games. We considered a few other factors as well, and we also gave some biographical/career information on the main players to help you to get to know them better. In part 2 here, our focus is on the selections, especially the final selections. But before we move on, we want to let you know that in the springtime of 2026, probably April, we will start producing episodes for the 2026 World Cup, which takes place, of course, in the summer of 2026. So keep an eye out for that, or better yet, subscribe to the channel and it will notify you when the episodes come out. All right, this mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Just like in part 1, we dedicate section 1 to team information. And then section 2 is the main part of the media cast here. We're going to review the list that we compiled in part 1, and we'll tell you who made the preliminary and final squad. We also try to predict the starters, so we took steps towards that in part 1 by providing a narrative of each position over the period, and we'll summarize that by letting you know who we thought the starters were at the end of part 1. We didn't actually talk about that in part 1 because that's our focus here, but we did make notes on it. However, they're all meaningless now because Cameroon has a new manager, as you will see when we begin section 2 here. Anyway, we will look at those lineups for the November game and see if it offers any insight, which it doesn't. And we will nevertheless try to make our predictions on the starters. In section 3, we're going to start with a spotlight review. That is a quick run through the main players who made and didn't make the squad, as well as our predicted starters. We're also going to review surprise selections and non-selections, quite a few of those for Cameroon here, as well as new players making the final squad, quite a few of those too. We'll also update on injuries in section 3. Let's jump right in then to section 1. And we're going to do some team information here. In part 1, we looked at the club affiliation of players, the games they played over the recent period, and their preferred formations. This part will be shorter here. We're just focusing on what the team published. Teams were required to submit a preliminary roster of up to 55 players to CAF, the organizers of the tournament, kind of Africa's version of FIFA. For the 2023 African Cup, CAF kindly published those lists, which made it easy for me. But some teams didn't like that, though, the publishing of the list. They felt it had some negative effects. So this time it was really up to the teams as to whether they published or not. So all in all, I used Google's AI Gemini to get the 55-man rosters. But honestly, in the process of doing so, I became a bit doubtful about its sourcing and accuracy. However, that was really just in a few of the finer details, some of the lesser players there on the preliminary squad. And overall, I think the rosters are fairly accurate. At the risk of a few mistakes, we're going to use that information here. The final rosters, on the other hand, are very accurate here. So teams are allowed to bring 28 teams to the tournament. Cameroon did produce a a 28-man squad there. And I'm just kind of making sure of that, to be honest. Yes, 28 players, and those players coming from their 55-man preliminary squad. That means they would have to cut just under half of the players, 27 players, from the preliminary squad to work out the final squad. All right, before we move on to section 2 and see who those players were, we're going to take a look at the games Cameroon played after October 2025. Well, most teams in Africa were playing friendlies in November, but Cameroon was playing an African playoff for the World Cup, so they were one of 4 teams making a playoff round there, or I should say playoff rounds, because it was kind of a semi-final and final setup there. Cameroon faced Congo DR in the semi-final, and then they lost that game. And so that was the only game they played. They actually fired the manager after that, which is going to lead to a lot of adventure in section 2 here. And yeah, that was the only game they played. I'm a bit surprised they didn't schedule a warm-up friendly under the new manager going into the Cup, but they didn't. Just this one game, and that's all we have to look at. And it was under the old manager, so we don't really think it's going to shed much insight on the selections that the new manager is going to make. Nevertheless, we will look at it. And let's go to section 2. The main part of the media cast here, where we look at our candidates, and we'll begin with the manager. We took the opportunity in part 1 to talk about the team's successes and failures over the past few years and the managers in charge of those. It was considered a big failure to lose in the semi-final playoff there, so they don't reach the World Cup, and they packed it in. The manager there, Breeze was his name, Mark Breeze, who had been manager of the team over the whole period. He came in February 2024 after the last African Cup, and that's when we began kind of our analysis from games from March of 2024. So basically, Mark Breeze was in charge for the whole thing, but was fired after the playoff game there, and so David Pagu was brought in fairly quickly afterwards. He was brought in on December 1st, 2025. And he's a local manager with a reputation for discipline. So it was expected that he would kind of bring order to a fractured system among the players, the FA and the government there. So that's kind of his mandate. Anyway, David Pagu will be in charge of the team. But again, we have no idea what his selections are, because he came in December, didn't have a warm-up game to try out these players, but nevertheless made a lot of changes. So it's going to be a pretty interesting section 2 here. All right, that's the manager. Let's move on to goalkeepers there. So we had 2 candidates at the definite level. The first one, Simon Omasolo. Simon Omasolo was selected for the squad, but the starter, who had been the starter for most of the period, Andre Onana, not selected at all. So maybe the first head to roll under the new manager's stricter discipline here. Andre Onana omitted actually for disciplinary, I have disciplinary / technical reasons, but sorry, my computer just alerted me to something there. Yes, I'll talk a bit about his reputation soon, but really no surprise there. Anyway, so Onana is out. The 2 possible candidates were selected. The first one, Davis Ipasi, And then the second one, Simon Ngapandu Etenbu. Ngapandu Etenbu was selected for the squad there. So those are our three goalkeepers. Fabrice Ondoa, really also an experienced goalkeeper, had been off the squad for a while, and he was actually selected for the preliminary squad, but that's as far as he got. So I was thinking of how to express the lack of experience here among the three goalkeepers they had selected. Just 14 caps among them. That's why I delayed to express it that way. Actually, we do have a fourth goalkeeper coming in, and it's a new candidate, and it is Edward Sombang. Well, he doesn't actually add any caps to our count, so now we have 14 caps among four goalkeepers. He's new to the squad. He was never selected prior to being named to the final squad, but he's not young. He's 27 years old and plays for Colombe in Cameroon there. He was born in Cameroon, so a local player there added to the squad. The manager is familiar with the local scene there, so perhaps he saw good things in Sombang. The other candidate just made the preliminary squad. It is Marcelin Mbabi, and yes, just making the preliminary squad there. So let's see if we can make any predictions here. After part one, we thought Andre Onana was a likely starter. He had been favoured under the previous manager and started all 5 of their fall 2025 games. That includes the November playoff match there. His non-selection makes it obvious that he was not a favourite of the new manager. As we said, the new manager brought in to bring calm and discipline, and it's not surprising that he didn't select Onana given his reputation. He had fights with previous manager Rigobert Song that were legendary and led to him being sent home during the World Cup in 2022 there. Among the selections we have Simon Omosola and Davis Mpasi. Davis Ipasi seem equally likely. Both of them started one game over the period. But given the situation, it wouldn't be a shock to see if one of the other twos got a start there. So we really don't know what to expect. Anyway, we did see Omosola and Ipasi as backups under Andre Onana. So we think they'll be a bit more likely than the other two. We're going to give 1 star to indicate that they are possible starters here, but that's as much as we're willing to venture. Okay, let's go to defenders and look at what we have for central defenders. No definite candidates here, and actually that kind of fits with the narrative, as you'll see soon. We had 3 likely candidates here, but the first 2 didn't make the squad, only made the preliminary squad. That is Michael Ngaju, or Michael Ngaju Ngajwi, and John Charles Castelletto. We had both of those, as you can see, as likely candidates, but surprisingly, neither of them made the cut. The third one, though, did. That's Christopher Wu. Sometimes that's pronounced Christopher Woe. I'll have to see during this cup what this announcer says. The last one said Christopher Woe, but I wasn't dead sure. Anyway, he was selected for the squad, and our 3 possible candidates. We have 3 possible candidates. The first one, Enzo Boyomo, also was selected, and so was Junior Koto Samuel. Some websites list him as Samuel Koto, so we're not actually dead sure what his last name is, but we have Junior Koto Samuel. He was also selected. The third one of the possible candidates, though, Guy Marcelin Kilama, was not selected even for the preliminary squad, and nor was our possible but unlikely candidate James Njungui. We had two players seemingly off the squad, though, and both of those did actually make the preliminary squad. The first one, Umar Gonzalez, and the second one, Harold Mukudi. Both of those having experience in African Cup tournaments there. And we have two new candidates to add to our list. So, yes, three central defenders, usually not enough. This will bring it up to five because both of them were selected. The first one is Che Malone, and the second one is Gurzino Niamsi. And we're going to introduce those because we said we would introduce any unexpected candidates in part two. So let's take a look at Che Malone. He's been with Cameroon since 2022. He has 6 caps for the team and is 26 years old. He plays for USM Alger in Algeria, one of the biggest teams in Algeria. And prior to that was with one of the biggest teams in Tanzania, Simba there. And for the senior team, though, his first and only appearance was a start in November 2022. All of his other caps were earned in kind of B-team competitions like the African Championship there. So Che Malone, not a very experienced player on the national team there, but making the squad nonetheless. Again, the manager's familiarity with the more local scene, probably part of the reason for that. The second player, though, actually does not play in Africa. Gurzino Niamsi plays for Lokomotiv Moscow in Russia since 2024 and is French-born. He was with Strasbourg in Strasbourg in France before that, and other French teams as well. He has no caps for the national team, despite being 28 years old. He's new to the squad, never selected even on the bench prior to being named to the final squad. So both of those kind of supporting probably the more experienced players up front. Okay, well, we go to our predictions here. And at the end of part one, earlier in the period, Christopher Wu and Michael Ngaju had been a fairly solid pairing, but from June of 2025, it became a rotation of several players. So in the fall of 2025, we're going to kind of count the caps of the major candidates, and it was Michael Ngaju with 3 playing or starting 3 of the 5 games. Nuhu Tolo, who's actually a left back, and we're going to meet him in that position. He started 2 games in central defense. Enzo Boyomo, 2 games. Jean-Charles Castelletto, 2 games, and Christopher Wu, only 1 game. But as we've seen, Ngaju and Castelletto, and those were the 2 actually who started the November playoff match, they are not selected here. And then we have those 2 new games brought in. So a little bit difficult to predict the starters, but one thing that is helping us is the number of candidates has been reduced. So we're looking at the experience on the bench here, and we think it's likely that they kind of have no choice but to use Christopher Wu. And then Enzo Boyomo, probably also experienced. So we're going to give 2 stars to each of those because we think they're likely starters. We're not sure if the new manager is going to use Nuhu as a central defender here, or whether he's going to put him back into left defense. Where we're going to meet him. But we would give 1 star for Nuhu as a possible candidate here. So we're just going to bring him up on the list. And he is a definite candidate. We'll give him 1 star over here as a possible starter. Again, not a lot to choose from there, especially with those 2 new players looking quite inexperienced. But there is a chance they may be used. We really don't know. Okay, let's go to the left back, and this is where we meet Nuhu Tolo. He was a definite candidate here, and he was selected for the final squad. And then we had a likely candidate, a likely candidate in Mahamadou Abubakar Nagida, and he too was selected for the final squad. A bit of a surprise selection in Darlin Yonghua, because we had him at the possible but unlikely level. So we'll introduce him. Again, we didn't introduce players at that level in part one. And that's three left backs, and we have no new candidates over here. So the fact that there are three left backs suggests that they might use Tolo as a central defender. Nagido has been basically backing him up when he has started that. So let's, no, I got to introduce Darlin Yonghua first. Okay, Darlin Yonghua has been with Cameroon since 2022. He has 10 caps and 1 goal up until October 2025, and he's 25 years old. Plays for Lorient in France since 2022, and has played for a couple of French clubs, but he did start in Cameroon there with the youth club. Yonghua was actually part of the African Cup there in 2023 or January 2024. He started games 1 and 3 there, and I think we had predicted him as the starter going into the last cup. But over this period, he basically the last 2 years hadn't started any of their 16 games. He was just subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for 12 games, including the last 4 matches. That's why we had Yonghua as possible but unlikely. But here he comes in under the new manager as a selection for the squad. So at the end of part one, because Tolo was playing as a centre back, we thought it would be pretty equal chances of either Tolo or Nagida as possible starters on this side. We saw when we were covering central defenders that Toho started 2 of the 5 games in the fall of 2025, 2 of those as a central defender, but he also started 2 games as a left back, including the playoff match there. So all in all, he started 4 of the 5 games. Nagida started the other 3 games as a left back. So Tolo 2 of them and Nagida 3 of them. And it's uncertain, though, what the new manager is going to think. Will he use Tolo as a central defender? Or will he kind of move him back to this position? We lean towards the second, but really we have no idea. But what we land on here is Tolo as a likely starter in this position, and Nagida as a possible starter in this position. But again, it's possible that we could be completely wrong here, because Yonghua adds an element of uncertainty as well. Okay, so let's go to right backs here. And here we had a definite candidate, but a big surprise in that Jackson Chachua only made the preliminary squad there. So that is a bit curious here. We had 3 candidates at the possible level, but only one of them was actually selected. The first one, Malcolm Bukele, just making the preliminary squad also there. The only one making the final cut was Junior Chamadu there. And the third one, Joyxim Dawa, not even making the preliminary squad, but that was because of injury there. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Faye Collins, a veteran in this position, just making the preliminary squad there. And finally, we had seemingly off the squad, Enzo Chato, not selected even for the preliminary squad. We really thought they'd bring someone in here, or else call back Collins Faye from the wilderness there. Collins Fay, still just 33 years old. But even though they did add an experienced player to the preliminary squad, he didn't make the final cut. It's Olivier Mbezo, who has tournament experience there. So we're just left with the possible candidate, Junior Chamadu. So this is a bit of a curious situation. We'll tell you that we had Jackson Chachua as a definite starter at the end of part one. So we're really surprised he wasn't selected. Jackson Chachua had taken command of the position after his arrival in June of 2024. Prior to that, they had trouble filling the position, and it was central defender Jean-Charles Castelletto that had basically been drafted in. However, now both of them are unavailable through non-selection. So it's a bit of a mystery box over here. As we see, the only candidate left standing is Junior Chamadu, who had returned after an almost 2-year absence in October 2025 to appear on the bench for their last game to October 2025. So really not much experience there. So we're wondering if he's intended to be the starter or whether another out-of-position player, someone along the lines of Castelletto, but someone who's actually selected for the squad, an out-of-position player could be equally possible. So that is what we predict in the end. We give 1 star as a possible starter to Junior Chamadu, and then we give 1 star to an out-of-position player, probably a centre-back, we would guess, there. So, yes, I'm curious to see how they're going to resolve that situation. All right, that's it for defense. We're going to move up to the midfield where we have more surprises in store. Well, the first one is we left him in the versatile midfielder category here. He's really become more of a central midfielder, truth be told. But it doesn't matter anyway, because Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa, only making the preliminary squad, we had him as a likely candidate here, although it is because of injury there, a hamstring injury that he has not recovered from. So Zambo Anguissa out due to injury. We'll get more details on that injury in section 3 there. Now we move on to players coded as defensive midfielders. No definite candidate there, but at the likely level, we had Martin Hongla. However, he only made the preliminary squad there. The other likely candidate, Carlos Baliba, did make the final cut there. We had 2 possible candidates. The first one, Ivan Neu, and he made the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And we had another possible candidate in Willity Yunusa. He didn't even make the preliminary squad there. 2 possible but unlikely candidates. The first one, Fidel Bryce Ambina, also not even making the preliminary squad. However, the other possible but unlikely candidate, Martin Z, was selected for the final squad there. So a possible but unlikely candidate making the cut. We also have a new candidate making the final squad there. So this candidate added to the preliminary roster. His name is Arnold Mail Camden, and we will introduce him. Kind of an interesting case there. The other player added was Gail Ondua. Yet again, another player with some tournament experience, named to the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut there. Let's take a look at Arnold Mail Camden. Then he's new to the squad. He had never been selected prior to being named to the final squad here. And if the manager's familiarity with the local scene seems the reason for some of these new candidates. It's not for Camden because he's been playing in Brazil. 6 or 7 Brazilian teams there after he moved from his club in Cameroon in 2020. So perhaps he's got some good experience there in Brazil. Camden is 25 years old and was born in Cameroon, but interestingly has been playing in Brazil. We're not going to look at predictions yet. We're going to look at central midfielders first and kind of do them together there. So for central midfielders, we have no definite candidate, but a likely candidate in Arthur Avom or Arthur Avom Ebong. I think he's called Ebong, perhaps even more than he is called Avom. There, he was selected for the final squad, and we have a possible candidate in Jean Onana, who overcame injury to earn selection for the final squad too. 2 possible candidates here. The first one, Boris Enau, just making the preliminary squad, and the second one, James Eto'o, not selected even for the preliminary squad. However, one of our seemingly off the squad players did make the final cut, and the other 3 made the preliminary squad. So I'll tell you the 3 who made the preliminary squad first. Ben Elliott, Pierre Koundé, and Oliver Cham. All of those just making the preliminary squad. But the second one on our list, Olivier Kemen, made the final squad, even though he was seemingly off the squad. All of these players seemingly off the squad for reasons that we covered in part 1. So there we go, Olivier Kemen added to the list. So that gives us 4 central midfielders, but we do have 1 new candidate making it, and it's yet another player with tournament experience called back in, but not making the final cut. It is Samuel Umguet named to the preliminary squad there. So that gives us 3 central midfielders and 3 defensive midfielders, 6 candidates in all. Maybe because we've looked at so many names, I'll just run through the names again. So we have Carlos Baliba, Martin Nzi, newcomer Arnold Mail Camden. And in fact, all of those are newcomers. If you're looking at the YouTube and you see their name in orange, that means they joined the squad during this period, the last 2 years. So we also have likely candidate Arthur Avom. All 4 so far have been new candidates, and then the last 2 are not. Jean Onana and Olivier Kemen. Both of those, their name is in a black script, suggesting they have, or indicating they have tournament experience. However, not a lot of experience overall here. Jean Onana and Olivier Kemen have only been involved in 1 tournament each there, whereas Andre Zambo Anguissa himself has about 6 tournaments under his belt, so they lose a lot of experience there. Okay, let us talk about the predicted starters then. And this is what we had at the end of part 1. We had as likely starters Arthur Avom or Arthur Ebong and Carlos Baliba. And then as possible starters, we had Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa and Martin Hongla, as well as left attacking midfielder Georges Kevin Nkudu. All 3 of those at the possible level. So that's what we thought going into the November friendly. Turned out to be a good prediction, actually, because our 2 likely candidates, Avom and Baliba, did start in the midfield there, and they were accompanied by a bit strangely by left back, the backup left back, Nagida, who we met there. He was playing as a left midfielder in a 4-3-3 formation. None of that matters, though, now. Andre Zambo Anguissa and Martin Hongler are off the slate. They're not on the final squad. So we make the following changes here. We're going to move Arthur Avom Ebong down and Carlos Baliba down to just possible starters. And that's where we're going to leave it because really we're quite uncertain under the new manager what to expect. So there's Arthur Avon Arthur Avon with 1 star beside him, and Carlos Baliba also 1 star there. All right, that's the midfield. Let's move on upfield to the attacking midfield. Just want to see if we have any candidates coded as left back or right backs, and we do actually have one right midfielder, and I think I should have introduced him in part 1 and just breezed straight past it. Oh no, I didn't. There he is on our list here. It's the possible but unlikely Boris Mfumu, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad there. Okay, now we can go to left attacking midfielders, and we had no candidates at the definite level, but someone we met in central midfield, Georges Kevin Nkudu, who sometimes does play in the midfield, but probably more as a left, either left midfielder in a 4-3-3 or left attacking midfielder. George Kevin Nkudu was selected for the final squad there. And our other likely candidate, Christian Basagog, also selected for the final squad. We had at the possible level Hamadou Mubarak, and he did not even make the preliminary squad, and nor did Clinton J, not making the preliminary squad there. No new candidates over here, so we're left with Nkudu and Basagog. Let's see what we thought at the end of part 1. Well, we thought Nkudu would be the likely starter over here. He started 3 of the games in September and October. There, 3 of the 4 games in this position, and in the other game he started as a central midfielder, so started all 4 games. However, we were a bit surprised when he only started on the bench in the playoff game there, and it was actually the forward Carl Etta-Eong getting the nod there. Both of those players were selected, but Christian Basagog also seems a pretty good option over here. So we're going to give 1 star to each of those players as starters over here. So Christian Basagog, we probably think Nkudu a bit more likely, honestly. Christian Basagog possible, and we're going to fetch Carl Etta-Eong's name from the forward line and put him here. I just want to see. He was a likely candidate. We'll put him here. All 3 of those actually likely candidates. They had been likely candidates to make the squad, and now we put all 3 of them as possible starters. Let's go to the right attackers side. This seems a bit more straightforward. Here we have definite candidate Brian Mbumo, and he was selected for the squad. He had missed the last African Cup due to injury there. We had 2 possible candidates, Patrick Soko, also selected for the squad, but the second one, Nathan Ngumu, not even making the preliminary squad, and that is because of an injury that we'll give more details on in the next section. We do have a new candidate making the squad here, though. It is Junior Dina Ebimbe. Junior Dina Ebimbe, and we will introduce him here since we didn't meet him in part 1. New to the squad here, never selected prior to being named to the final squad, but not that young. He's 25 years old and plays for Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany since 2022. He's actually on loan to Stade Brest in France there since 2025. Prior to Eintracht Frankfurt, though, he was with the Paris Saint-Germain team there from 2018 to 2022. He was loaned out a couple of times there, but still on that squad. And he is French-born, Ibimbe. So kind of an interesting prospect here to add, although I really doubt he'll get a start as a right attacker ahead of Brian Mbumo, but perhaps somewhere else on the field we might see him. Those are our three candidates. Let's go to see what we thought after part one. And we had Brian Mbumo as a definite starter over here. The backup seemed to be the forward, Nicholas Mumi Ngamalu. So we did have him as a possible starter at the end of part one. Probably more like a backup if Mbumo was absent rather than starting ahead of him. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Ngumalo was not selected for the final squad here, so the backup player will change, and we don't think it will. We don't think the starter will change, though, given Mbumo's form. So even under the new manager, we're going to put him as a definite starter. I think he's the only one that we are that confident in. Meanwhile, the backup now could be anyone, but we do favor newcomer Mbimbe over Soko, over Patrick Soko there. Not that we're talking with any expertise or insight here, just kind of a feeling really based on club affiliations, I suppose. An out-of-position player, though, is also possible. So we are going to put Brian Mbumo as the definite starter over here with 3 stars. And yes, when it comes to the backup, well, we don't assign stars to the backup, but really it could be anyone. Okay, let's move on to central attacking midfield, a position that they don't use that much, but they did use it 3 times, and all of those were in 2025. However, that was under the old manager here or there. Oh, I didn't move the graphics here. So we only have 2 possible candidates here. The first one, Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, surprisingly returned for a bench appearance in June of 2024 and then was selected right at the end. I think it was one game that he started one of the game and was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2. So we had him as a possible candidate, but he wasn't even named to the preliminary squad, Choupo-Moting. So that could be the end for him because he's 36 years old now. However, our other candidate, Danny Namaso, was selected for the final squad. And then we had a newcomer, although he just made the preliminary squad. It is Wilfred Nathan Douala there. Anyway, the only one selected was Danny Namaso. And our prediction really over here is that they're not going to use the position. However, they could use it maybe to bring in a secondary player like Basagog or Ibimbe, who we just met. We don't think it'll be Namaso, though. So we're going to give 2 stars to the position not being used, and then 1 star actually to an out-of-position player. We think that's a bit more likely than Danny Namaso getting a start. Okay, let's move on to the forwards. We're going to pause at secondary strikers because we did have 1 candidate at this level. It was the seemingly off the squad Lionel Atiba, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. So we can move on to forwards, and we'll finish with a surprise. We had a definite candidate in Vincent Abubakar. He was captain of the team as well, but only made the preliminary squad there. So that's a real talking point. 3 likely candidates here. And the first one, Frank Magri, was selected for the final squad. The second one we actually learned earlier, Nicholas Mumi Ngamalu, only making the preliminary squad there. but the third one, Carl Etta Eong, did make the final cut. The possible candidate is Ignacio Ganago, and he just made the preliminary squad there. And two possible but unlikely candidates here, Serge Daura and Jean Batum, neither of those even making the preliminary squad there. However, one of our seemingly off the squad, in fact, both of them did make the preliminary squad, Faris Mumbagna and Carl Toko Ekambi. So again, players with tournament experience there. It can be a veteran, but none of them or neither of them making the final cut there. So we're only left with two candidates here, but we do have one to introduce who made the final squad. So we'll summarize after. The one making the final squad, Christian Kofane. Christian Kofane, just 19 years old, new to the squad, having never been selected prior to being named to the preliminary and then the final squad. And he is with Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, a big move up there for him in 2025. He was briefly with Albacete in Spain, but was with a club in Cameroon in 2024. So Christian Kofane, a bit of an exciting prospect here, and making the team. So that leaves us with three forwards then, Frank Magri, Carl Etta Eong, and Christian Kofane, the last two of those new to the squad during this period. So big changes here for Cameroon. Let's see if we can predict starters here. Well, leading into the November games at the end of October, we thought Vincent de Boubacar was a likely starter, possibly maybe, close to a definite starter there. We had put Carl Etta Eong as a possible starter because we didn't move him to left attacking midfield because he really starts more as a forward. Vincent de Boubacar, though, was in command of the position for all of the period up until the last two games in October, which Carl Etta Eong started. So we did recognize that challenge to the starting position. Unexpectedly, though, in the important playoff game there, it was Frank Magri who got the start, although Vincent de Boubacar did replace him at halftime. Eong also started that game, though. He played as a left forward in a 4-3-3 formation. So as we see, a bit shockingly, Boubacar not selected. The other two, Magri and Eong, were. So they remain our possible starters, particularly given that there are not a lot of options here. They do have the option of a couple of new exciting players, but we don't think they're going to start those players in the first game there. So we're actually fairly sure it'll be either Magri or Eong, but again, it's a new manager, very hard to make firm predictions there. Okay, that brings us to the end of our section 2 of our look at players, and we move into section 3. And we want to welcome listeners to the short version of the mediacast here. We're going to begin with our spotlight review. That is a race through the squad, reviewing what we've covered in section 2. Well, really, what we've covered in parts 1 and part 2. So part 1, we kind of built this list, putting players at their likelihood of making the squad and giving some information about them. And then in section 2, showing you who made the squad and who didn't, and also making predictions. That is very difficult in the situation because the manager, David Pagu, came in after the last game they played. So they, the manager who guided them through World Cup qualifying was fired after they lost the first playoff games. That was Mark Breeze. And David Pagu, a kind of a local manager, came in and his mandate was to kind of clear up a messy situation among the players, the FA, and the government. And he seems to have done that, but made a lot of changes. Well, time will tell whether he did it. Anyway, he is working towards that, I should say. And there are a lot of changes on this squad as a result of him coming in, but we'll consider David Pagu a successful selection for the final squad. He will lead them through the tournament. For goalkeepers, we have definite candidate Simon Omosolo making the cut. But surprise, the first of many surprises here, Andre Onana not selected even for the preliminary squad. Our two possible candidates, Davis Ipasi and Simon Ungapanduetenbu, both of those selected for the final squad. We're not going to talk about players below the possible level unless they make the final cut. And lo and behold, we do have one here. So a fourth goalkeeper, Edouard Songbang, added to the squad here. And as we noted in section 2, just 14 caps among these four goalkeepers, so not bringing a lot of experience to the cup. In terms of starters, we're really not sure because of the new manager, but we give possible to Simon Omosola and Davis Ipasi. That's where we landed on that. Let's move on to central defenders. We had no definite candidate here, but three likely candidates. The first two didn't make the final squad, though, just the preliminary squad. That is Michael Ngaju and John Charles Castelletto. So more surprises there. Our third likely candidate, though, Christopher Woe, did make the cut, and the first two of our possible candidates also making it. That is Enzo Boyomo and Junior Cotto Samuel. Both of those selected for the final squad. And that's it, other than the fact that we have two new candidates added to the list here. So Che Malone, or Che Malone, and Gurzino Nyamsi. Both of those added to the final squad. In terms of starters, well, there's not really a lot to choose from, especially in terms of experienced players. So for that reason, we think Christopher Wu, or Christopher Woe, we're not really sure how to pronounce it, is a likely starter. And then Enzo Boyomo, we also think is a likely starter. We also think left back Nuhu Tolo, who we'll meet right away here, is a possible starter in central defence. Okay, let's move to the left back, and this is where we meet Nuhu Tolo. He was a definite candidate, and he was selected for the squad, as was our likely candidate, Mohamedou Abubakar Nagida. Nagida, probably the name he will be known by. He too selected for the final squad. And a bit of a surprise here in that our possible but unlikely candidate, Darlin Yonghwa, also selected for the final squad. So three left backs here, which maybe suggests that Tolo will be used in central defence. Anyway, we consider Nuhu Tolo a likely starter, especially given that he could start here or as a centre back. And we think Nagida a possible starter over here. It's also possible, but both of them could be on the pitch too. Okay, let's move to right backs, and a surprise right away here. Definite candidate Jackson Chachua, who'd really been in command of the position over the period, not selected for the final squad, just the preliminary squad there. And we had three possible candidates, Malcolm Bokeli just making the preliminary squad as well, and Junior Chamadu, ultimately the only right back selected here for the final squad, because possible candidate Joyxin Dawa not selected even for the preliminary squad. And so it's just Junior Chamadu over here, but we're not convinced he'll be the starter. So we give him 1 star as a possible starter, and 1 star to an out of position player, probably a central defender, we think might start over here as well. Okay, upfield we go to defensive midfielders. No, well, we got to stop at versatile midfielder Andre Zambo Anguissa. And another surprise here, just making the preliminary squad, although in this case it's due to injury there. So, players coded as defensive midfielder are likely candidate Martin Hongla, also just making the preliminary squad, not the final cut there. But the second one, Carlos Baliba, was selected for the final squad. Neither of our two possible candidates made it. Ivan Neu just making the preliminary squad, and Willity Yunusa not even getting as far as that. However, we do have a possible but unlikely candidate that was selected, and it's Martin Nzi making the final cut there. And we have a new candidate also making it, a player who plays in Brazil, Arnold Mail Camden. Also making the final cut. Might be interesting to see if he gets on the field. We have central midfielders to cover before we talk about starters here. Our likely candidate, Arthur Avon, or Arthur Avon Ibong, was selected for the final squad. So was our possible candidate, Jean Onana. And then one of our four players, seemingly off the squad, made the final cut. That was Olivier Kemen, kind of coming in from the cold there and joining as one of the defensive/central midfielders. Now we can talk about possible starters, but again, under the new manager, it's difficult to be confident. We think Carlos Baliba is a possible starter, and Arthur Avon also a possible starter, but that's as much as we're willing to kind of predict there. Okay, moving upfield to left attacking midfielders. No definite candidate here, but two likely candidates. Georges Kevin Nkudu and Christian Bassagol, both of those were selected for the final squad. And we give both of them a possible level of being the starter over here. But we also think it's possible that the forward, who we'll meet a bit later, Carl Etta-Eong, could be a starter over here. So we give them all 1 star to indicate a possibility of starting. Quite different though on the right side. We have definite candidate Brian Mbumo, and we think he's going to be a definite starter. I'll just throw that out there right now. Our first possible candidate, Patrick Soko, was selected for the squad, but our second one, Nathan Ngumu, not even making the preliminary squad there. And we have a new candidate here, Junior Dina Ibimde, and he was added to the squad, so made the final cut there. But again, we think it's difficult, unlikely they'll get on the field ahead of Brian Mbumo, barring some injury or something like that. So we consider Brian Mbumo the definite candidate. I think he's the only player we've given 3 stars to. Moving to central attackers, we had no definite or likely candidates, just 2 at the possible level. The first one was actually Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. But the second one, Danny Namaso, did make the final cut there. Nevertheless, we think it's likely that this position will not be used. So we give 2 stars to that as the likely eventuality. And if they do use it, we actually think an out-of-position player would be used ahead of Danny Namaso. So we give 1 star to that possibility there. Okay, let's move on to the last category, the forwards, and we finish with a surprise, just like we started with. It's Vincent Abubakar, a definite candidate. He started a lot over the period, but didn't make the final cut, so that's their captain out of the picture. We're going to have a new captain here. We have 3 candidates at the likely level. The middle one, Mumi Ungamalu, not selected either, just making the preliminary squad there. But we had both of the others selected, Frank Magri and Carl Etta Eong, who we met when we were talking about left attackers there. Both of them selected. At the possible level, we have Ignatius Ganago, just making the preliminary squad. But then we have a new candidate, a bit exciting here, Christian Kofane, making the final cut. So we'll see if he gets on the field. Meanwhile, our predictions are a bit muted here as well. Just 1 star for Frank Magri and 1 star for Carl Etta Eong. There. We do kind of slightly favour Eong, but not enough to put him as a likely candidate there. All right, that brings us to the end of our Spotlight review. And we're going to go through some of the surprises here in summary. Quite a bit to go through here, so I won't belabor the issue. The first notable non-selection is goalkeeper Andre Onana, not even selected for the preliminary squad there. We had him as a definite candidate, but again, this is all under the new manager, so big changes afoot. Central defender Michael Ngaju Ngadri, just making the preliminary squad. We had him as a likely candidate, and so too Charles Castelletto, also a central defender and a likely candidate for us, but just named to the preliminary squad here. Maybe one of the biggest surprises, Jackson Chachua, a right back who we had as a definite candidate, not even making the final squad there, just the preliminary squad. The next one is more understandable. It's Andre Zambo and Guisa, that one due to injury. So we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the injury review here. And finally, we have defensive midfielder Martin Hongla. We had him as a likely candidate. But wait a minute, what's going on? I should have Vincent Abubakar on the list here because that's probably the biggest surprise of all, because he was the captain of the team, and just trying to find his name so I can put it on the list here. Vincent Abubakar, also a very notable non-selection there. Okay, so those are big changes, and along with them, we have new players coming in. I'm just looking for my spot here, sorry. We have a few unexpected players. The first one, left back Dorlin Yonghua, we had as a possible but unlikely candidate, but he was selected. The next one, Martin Z, a defensive midfielder who we also thought possible but unlikely, but did make the cut. And finally, Olivia Kemen, central midfielder who had seemed to be off the squad, last appearing in the previous African Cup, but Olivia Kemen called in from out of the cold there to the squad. More so, though, we have new players, some of them quite exciting looking. We won't recount that, but we did introduce them in section 1. So we have actually a fourth goalkeeper, Edward Sombang, making the final cut. 2 central defenders, the first one Che Malone, and the second one Gurzino Nyamsi, both newly added here. Right attacking midfielder. He's coded as a right midfielder, but we moved him to right attacking midfield. Junior Dina Ibimbe. All 3 of these next ones look like kind of exciting prospects, actually. So Ibimbe there. Defensive midfielder Arnold Mail Camden, who plays his club soccer in Brazil and has for most of his career. And then 19-year-old Christian Kofane, a forward, making the squad, recently moved to Bayer Leverkusen. So that's a pretty big club. Woo, look at all that. And the injury situation is also a bit long. Let's look at the previous injury list there. Um, that's what we left with at the end of part one. So let's update you on these players. Well, we had Gene Onana, but even at the end of part one, we knew he was recovered from injury. He had been out with muscular problems for the November playoff match there, but was on the bench for his team before the end of the month. And then the biggest indicator of all, his selection for the final squad, indicating that he is truly recovered from his injury. So Gino Nana making the final squad there. Next we have, oh, that's on the previous injury list, so I should be putting this on the new injury list. Next, we had a close call with Nathan Ngumu, the right back or the right winger, right attacking midfielder. I should say Nathan Ngumu had been out with his third injury since October 2024. An Achilles tendon rupture from mid-April 2025. And he, at the end of part one, had not been expected back until December 31st, which would have been, too late to make the squad. That seems to be accurate. He seems to have overcome the actual injury, but is still out of action, building up his fitness. And now it says he's expected back on January 19th. Anyway, as far as we're concerned, was never really going to overcome that injury in time for the cup. However, we just had him at the possible level there, so we're going to put him as injured but was not a strong candidate there. Next, we have the forward, Gagnio Ignatius. Sorry, I'm butchering that name there. Ignatius Ganago, who was unknown at the end of part one, out with a calf injury from mid-September. It remained that way up until the middle of October, but then we had no information on his team after that, but he was still listed as injured at the end of part one. And now he's no longer listed as injured, but he hasn't played for his club or country since the injury. Ignatius Ganago was named to the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. I'm not sure I made clear that Nathan Ngumu was not even named to the preliminary squad. I think they knew his injury would prevent him. Ignatius Ganago, perhaps they were hoping that he would recover, but he was only a possible candidate. So we're going to put him too as injured or not a strong candidate. That kind of means that we don't really think the injury had that much to do with his non-selection there. Okay, the next one on our list was two players out of contention. We knew that at the end of part one. The first one is Dawa Joyskim. Jawa Joyskim was out with torn knee ligaments, a long-term injury there from March 2025. He is expected back on January 10th in 2026. So not available for the cup there. His prognosis remains the same, and he was not even named to the preliminary squad. However, we had him at the possible level, so we also say injured but not a strong candidate for him. And then the last one is Andre Zambo Anguissa, and he is out with a hamstring injury since late November, so a fairly recent injury there. He's expected back on February 16th, so was well out of any chance of making the squad here. That prognosis, by the way, remains the same. In the middle of February, he's due back. In his case, we will put him as dropped due to injury because we're pretty sure he would have been selected. He was a likely candidate, but perhaps even more likely than that, close to a definite candidate. So that is it. Let's see if we have any new injuries, because all of those we did know about in part one. New injuries, we have none. So that is good for Cameroon. And that brings us to the end. So, closing thoughts? Well, we're just very curious to see what will happen under the new manager. It's very difficult to predict anything because no games have been played under him. So, we only have the selections he made as a clue. There, and he made a lot of changes, but that doesn't give us a clue as to who he has in mind for starters. So we'll have to wait till the first game. We did make some tentative predictions here, but we don't have any great confidence in any except Brian and Bumo starting now. That's about it. Okay, that brings us to the end of our look at Cameroon, part 2 of Cameroon's players, and well, we're not going to see Cameroon in the World Cup coming up, but perhaps in the next African Cup. After 2027, the African Cup will be every 4 years. That's been agreed to. Anyway, so probably in the next African Cup, we'll meet Cameroon again. We would like to thank Pixabay and Cold Fingers for the wonderful music used in this mediacast. The title of the piece is Eid Mubarak.